My parents said, "You shouldn't ruin your brother's wedding with your appearance. Stay home." I just smiled and cancelled the $2,500 transfer for their banquet. But they had no idea that the estate where the wedding was supposed to take place actually belonged to me. Emily had always been a shadow in her own home. It wasn't that she was deliberately ignored. Rather, she was simply unnoticed, like a piece of furniture or the familiar scenery outside the window. James, her older brother, was the sun around which the entire family revolved. He was handsome, charming, and successful, at least in the eyes of Susan and Robert, their parents. Any achievement of his, no matter how small, was met with a storm of enthusiasm and praise. Emily, on the other hand, no matter how hard she tried, always remained in the shadow of his glory. She excelled in school, but that was taken for granted. James, however, would receive praise for effort even when he got a C. Emily graduated from university with honours, but her parents only offered a curt congratulations before swiftly shifting to discuss James's latest victory at a corporate bowling tournament. Emily worked diligently and responsibly, but her contributions to the family budget were seen as something expected, unworthy of gratitude. James, who hopped between jobs, always received moral and financial support from their parents, with his failures blamed on jealous rivals. Emily didn't envy her brother. No, she just wanted her efforts to be noticed, her opinions to matter, and for someone to simply see her. But as she grew older, she realized that would never happen. In their family, there was an unspoken rule. James was the hero, and she was the humble worker meant to support his triumphs. After graduating, Emily landed a job as a programmer at a small firm. The work was monotonous and not particularly exciting, but it provided a steady income. Unlike James, who preferred creative professions that required little responsibility, Emily knew how to save money. She denied herself new clothes, trendy gadgets, and beach vacations. All her savings went into a special account dedicated to fulfilling her lifelong dream. That dream was born when Emily was a child, the first time she saw an old abandoned estate on the outskirts of town. The dilapidated house with columns and a sprawling park seemed like something out of a fairy tale. She imagined restoring it, breathing new life into it, and turning it into a place filled with joy and celebration. Years passed. The estate decayed further, but Emily's dream never faded. She continued saving, studying architecture and design, and researching restoration work. Finally, the day came when she could make it happen. A few years ago, the estate was put up for sale. Without hesitation, Emily seized the opportunity. She purchased it in her name but didn't tell anyone in her family. She knew her parents wouldn't approve of her crazy idea, and James would likely just laugh at her. Right after the purchase, Emily contacted Michael Thompson, a longtime family friend and experienced manager. Michael was a man of few words, but utterly reliable. He had known about Emily's dream for years and eagerly offered his help. Together, they devised a restoration plan and began bringing it to life. The work progressed slowly but steadily. Emily poured all her savings into the project and spent every free moment overseeing the process. To keep the estate from sitting idle, Michael suggested renting it out for events like weddings, anniversaries, and corporate parties. Emily was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. The rental income funded further restoration and maintenance. And so, Emily lived a double life. By day, she was a modest programmer, blending into the office crowd. By night and on weekends, she was the owner of a beautiful estate that was gradually transforming into something stunning and cozy. None of her family suspected her secret ownership. They continued to see her as a grey mouse, And Emily wasn't in a hurry to correct them. She enjoyed keeping her secret, feeling strong and independent. She knew that one day she'd have to reveal the truth, and that day was approaching. James and Jessica chose the estate for their wedding through an agency, unaware of who owned it. Emily found out by chance while reviewing documents Michael brought for her to sign. The agency's name, the date, and the names of the bride and groom all matched. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let on. She was curious to see how things would unfold. Soon, a formal invitation arrived, a white envelope with elegant calligraphy. Inside was expensive paper with embossing. Emily smirked. It was pure formality. They hadn't even bothered to call or invite her in person, just sent an invitation as if it were a social event, not her brother's wedding. Then came the day when Susan, Emily, and James's mother visited her at home. Her face was tense, her gaze judgmental. Emily offered her tea, but Susan waved it off. "I need to talk to you," she began, perching on the edge of the sofa. "James's wedding. You understand how important this is for our family." Emily nodded, though she knew her mother only cared about things that made the family look good to others. "We want everything to be perfect," Susan continued, choosing her words carefully. "And, well, Emily, you know—" Emily waited patiently, knowing the real point was coming. "We've decided it's better if you don't come," Susan finally blurted out. Emily raised her eyebrows, feigning surprise, though deep down she was prepared for this. Not attend James's wedding? Why? Susan hesitated, avoiding her daughter's gaze. "You know, the photos, the guests. You tend to fade into the background. Don't take it personally, Emily. You know how Jessica is. She's particular about appearances. And besides, you don't like noisy events, right? You'll be more comfortable at home, in peace." Emily stared into her mother's eyes. There wasn't a hint of empathy, only concern about not ruining the perfect wedding image. "So," Emily said slowly, "you think I'll ruin the wedding with my presence?" Susan flushed. "Not exactly. It's just, you'll be better off at home, trust me. We'll send you photos, bring you some cake. You won't miss anything." Emily turned to the window to hide the tears welling up. Once again, they were trying to push her into the shadows, make her invisible, unnecessary. And once again, she had let them. But this time, things would be different. "Okay, Mom," she said quietly, keeping her voice steady. "I'll stay home." Susan sighed with relief. "That's great, Emily. You've always understood us. We appreciate your sensibility." She quickly said goodbye and left, confident she'd handled everything. Emily stood alone, staring out at the dreary autumn landscape. Rage, mixed with hurt and disappointment, churned inside her. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, fueling a fire of determination. Enough. She wouldn't let them control her anymore. She would show them what she was truly worth. The next morning, Emily went to work as usual. The job was routine and uninteresting, but stable, allowing her to pay bills and save for the estate's restoration. During lunch, she visited the bank and cancelled the planned $2,500 transfer for the wedding expenses. The money was meant to cover the estate rental and other small costs. She knew James and Jessica were counting on her help, as always, but this time, they'd get nothing. Then she called Michael. "Hello, Michael. It's Emily." "Hello, Emily. Is something wrong?" "Yes, Michael. I need to meet with you urgently." As always, Michael was concise and punctual. He arrived at her office within an hour. Emily told him about the conversation with her mother and her decision. "Michael, I need you to cancel the estate rental agreement for James and Jessica's wedding." Michael listened attentively, without interrupting. His face showed neither surprise nor judgment. He'd known Emily for years and understood she didn't make decisions impulsively. "Reason?" he asked curtly. "Failure to make the prepayment on time," Emily replied. Michael nodded. "All right, Emily, I'll take care of it. When should the agreement be cancelled?" "The morning of the wedding," she answered. "Let them find out when the guests start arriving." Michael nodded again, stood, and headed for the door. "It'll be done as you wish, Emily." Emily watched him leave, feeling a sense of anticipation growing within her. The day of James and Jessica's wedding would be a day of truth, a day when she would show them who she really was. The wedding morning was unusually sunny, as if nature itself was smirking at the events to come. Emily woke with a strange sense of relief, as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She sipped her coffee, looking out at the quiet courtyard of her modest home, and thought about how different its simplicity was from the ostentatious luxury of the estate. Meanwhile, her family was in a pre-wedding frenzy. Jessica, in a silk robe, darted around, giving orders to stylists. James, smug and self-assured, accepted congratulations from friends, slapping them on the back and promising a wild party. Susan and Robert, the parents, fussed about. Only a few hours remained until the ceremony. Soon, the first guests began arriving at the estate. Elegant ladies in hats, men in suits, children with balloons. They all anticipated a lavish celebration. But instead of a welcoming orchestra and smiling hosts, they were greeted by Michael. His stern demeanor and formal tone immediately put the arrivals on edge. "Good afternoon," he addressed the confused crowd. "I'm very sorry to inform you, but the wedding has been cancelled by the decision of the estate's owner." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of what was happening. "Cancelled?" One guest protested. "We were invited." "We apologize for the inconvenience," Michael replied, maintaining his composure. "The organizers failed to meet the terms of the rental agreement, so the owner decided to terminate it." As Michael explained, an enraged James stormed up to him. "What's going on here?" he shouted, grabbing Michael's jacket sleeve. "What cancellation? Who decided this?" Michael calmly freed himself from James's grip and looked him in the eye. "I'm acting on the owner's instructions," he said. "Any questions should be directed to them." "Who the hell is the owner?" James yelled, losing control. "Where are they? Why wasn't I told?" At that moment, Susan and Robert approached, their faces a mix of confusion and anger. "Michael, what kind of joke is this?" Susan shrieked. "You know today is my son's wedding." "I'm very sorry, Susan," Michael replied, "but I'm only following the owner's orders." "Who is this owner?" Robert demanded, clenching his fists. "We need to speak with them now." Michael silently pointed to a car pulling up to the estate. Out stepped Emily. Everyone froze. James, Susan, Robert. They stared at her as if she were a ghost. Jessica, standing a bit further away, sneered contemptuously. "Emily?" James whispered, unable to believe his eyes. "What are you doing here?" Emily stepped out of the car and approached them slowly. There was no fear or embarrassment in her eyes, only resolve. "I'm here because I'm the owner of this estate," she said calmly. A deafening silence followed. The guests, forgetting their complaints, watched the scene with curiosity. James, Susan, and Robert stood stunned. Jessica let out a scornful huff, but a flicker of unease crossed her eyes. "You're the owner?" James finally managed to say. "That's impossible." "Oh, it's very possible," Emily replied, meeting his gaze. "I bought this estate a few years ago and have been restoring it ever since." "But where did you get the money?" Susan asked, incredulous. You're just a programmer. I worked tirelessly, Emily answered. I saved on everything, sacrificed a lot, all to make my dream come true. But why keep it a secret? Robert asked, struggling to process it all. Because I knew you wouldn't understand, Emily said. You've always seen me as a grey mouse, unworthy of anything greater. You praised James for the smallest things, while my achievements were ignored. James tried to protest, but Emily cut him off. No need, James, she said. You were always the favourite, and I don't blame you for that, but I'm done living in your shadow. I want to be respected and valued for who I am, not for what I can give. Jessica, who had been silently observing, decided to intervene. Who do you think you are, ruining our wedding? She screamed, rushing toward Emily. You're just jealous of us. Emily looked at her calmly. I'm not jealous, she said. I just want to be left alone. I don't want anything to do with people who don't value or respect me. You'll regret this, Jessica spat, furious. You'll see how we live, and you'll be left alone. Maybe, Emily replied, but I'd rather be alone than live in a world of lies and hypocrisy. With that, Emily turned and walked to her car. The guests parted to let her pass. James, Susan, and Robert stood in the courtyard, humiliated and lost. Jessica stomped her feet in rage, shouting, Damn it! As Emily got into her car, Michael approached her. You did the right thing, he said, nodding. It was about time they were put in their place. Emily smiled. Thank you, Michael, she said. I couldn't have done it without you. Emily started the car and drove away from the estate. In her rear-view mirror, she saw the disappointed guests leaving the failed celebration. James, Susan, and Robert stood like lost souls, unsure of what to do next. The wedding was ruined, and with it, the carefully crafted illusions about who the grey mouse, Emily, was supposed to be. Shock, anger, and confusion hung in the air like storm clouds ready to burst. The guests, like a flock of startled birds, hurriedly left the estate, whispering and casting sympathetic yet judgmental glances at Emily's stunned family. James stood in the courtyard, his usually smug face now contorted with rage and humiliation. Jessica, who had been radiant in her wedding dress, now looked like a faded version of herself, her makeup smeared by tears and her carefully styled hair dishevelled from nervous pacing. Susan and Robert, typically so confident and authoritative, stood clinging to each other like orphaned children who'd lost their anchor. They watched the departing cars and the emptying estate, their eyes reflecting the realization of the disaster's magnitude. Michael, maintaining his calm demeanor, observed from a distance. He knew Emily needed peace and quiet now to process this emotional explosion. He had done his part and could only hope she would make the most of her victory. Meanwhile, Emily returned to her modest home and sat by the window, watching the day fade. She felt drained, but also filled with a strange, unfamiliar strength. Yes, she had ruined her brother's wedding. Yes, she had humiliated her parents. But didn't they deserve it? Had they ever seen her as a person, not just a convenient accessory to their perfect lives? She recalled the endless years spent in James's shadow. His minor achievements were celebrated to the skies, while her hard work went unnoticed. James, our pride, our hope, her parents would say. And she, Emily, was just the helper, the grey mouse always there to fix problems and patch holes. She remembered dreaming of owning the estate since childhood, saving every penny, denying herself everything to make it a reality, and spending nights poring over blueprints and restoration plans, pouring her heart into the project, all while hiding it from her family, knowing they'd never understand her aspirations. Now that her dream was real, She had used it to break free from her family's oppression. She knew her actions would spark outrage and condemnation, but she could no longer live by their rules. She deserved respect and recognition, and if her family wasn't willing to give it, she was ready to cut ties with them for good. That evening, as dusk settled over the estate, a car pulled up to Emily's house. Susan and Robert stepped out, their faces pale and haggard. "Emily, sweetheart," Susan began, her voice trembling. "What have you done? You've ruined our lives." Emily looked at her mother silently. There was no anger or resentment in her eyes, only exhaustion. "I ruined your lives?" she asked quietly. "Did you ever think about how you were ruining mine?" Robert tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "We've always loved you, Emily," he said. "It's just, James was always special." "Special?" Emily scoffed. "He was just good at pretending, and I was always there to back him up so you could be proud of him." "But we're your family, Emily," Susan cried. "We're supposed to support each other." "Support?" Emily echoed. "When did you ever support me? When was the last time you asked about my life, my dreams? You saw me as a convenient tool, not a person." Her parents fell silent, heads bowed. They knew Emily was right. They hadn't noticed her, hadn't valued her, had used her. "We were wrong, Emily," Robert mumbled. "We realize that now. Please forgive us." "Forgive?" Emily sighed. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I do know I won't let you use me anymore." "But how will we manage without you, Emily?" Susan sobbed. "You always helped us with money, with everything." "You'll have to learn to manage on your own," Emily replied. "I'm done being your fix-it person." With that, Emily closed the door in their faces. She knew they would suffer, but she had suffered for years too. Now it was her time to live her own life. In the days and weeks that followed, Emily's life changed dramatically. She quit her job and devoted herself entirely to managing the estate. With Michael's help, she developed a new business strategy, attracted new clients, and turned the estate into a thriving enterprise. James and Jessica tried to contact her, begging for forgiveness and offering money, but Emily remained steadfast. She wanted nothing to do with people who had belittled and undervalued her for so long. Her parents also kept trying to win her back, calling daily, showing up at her house and sending messages. But Emily didn't answer, didn't open the door, and didn't read their texts. She knew that giving them even the slightest hope would let them try to use her again. In time, her parents accepted that Emily was gone from their lives. They realized they hadn't just lost a convenient helper, but a loving daughter and sister. They understood that their biases and selfishness had destroyed their family. Emily, on the other hand, felt free and happy. She no longer lived in the shadow of others' expectations. She shaped her own destiny, surrounded herself with friends who valued her for who she was, traveled, pursued her passions, and savored every moment of her new life. The estate became more than a business for Emily. It was a symbol of her freedom and independence. She poured her soul into it, transforming it into a beautiful place where people could enjoy nature and harmony. Sometimes, watching the sun set over the estate, Emily thought of her family. She felt no anger or resentment, only sadness. She regretted that they couldn't see her as a person, that their prejudices had ruined their relationship, but she knew she'd made the right choice. She chose herself, her freedom, and her dignity, and that was what mattered most. Emily began building her life on her own terms. She no longer let anyone manipulate her, learned to value herself and her achievements, and became a strong, confident, independent woman. This was just the beginning of her new life, a life filled with meaning, love, and freedom.